5, the 10 to the 5, touchdown! 6, going to the hoop, puts it up, puts it in! A fantastic play.
Welcome back into the Magnolia Fields podcast from the Richard Schwartz and Associates studios. This is a hotty toddy edition. It's episode 19 of Magnolia Fields. He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. Brad, glad to see you're better. I know you had a little bit of a health scare, and we're so happy that you were able to come down here today, and I know you're putting those problems behind you. It is true that I'm wearing black today because I'm in mourning. This is the Wednesday after the Kentucky game. And I've got to get so much off my chest that I almost suggested we just do 25 minutes on what went wrong and 5 minutes on everything else. But I didn't want to belabor it. I think the time of possession, almost 40 minutes for Kentucky, only 20 minutes for Ole Miss. I thought the game plan was not – it was very vanilla, lack of adjustments. I thought that this was a game that will go down in history in the same folder with the 4th and 25 against Arkansas. The 4th and 7 conversion that the defense, who played well, gave up only 20 points, should have won that game by double digits, 40-20. Your thoughts about what went wrong during the Kentucky game? Final score, Kentucky 20, Ole Miss 17.
I think pretty much in every facet of the game, Ole Miss fell short. Now, we'll get to what I think Ole Miss did right in just a moment. The only thing that really matters is the scoreboard indicated that Kentucky won that game. In the history of Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, and we're on year 5 of this, he's lost 2 games in which he was a favorite. Both those games were at home. You can add a third one to that. He just doesn't lose games to where he's supposed to win, and this was a bit of an anomaly. I think a lot of that is what happened is Kentucky's game plan was so much better than Ole Miss's, and I think even with Ole Miss scripting the first drive, coming out, laying a foundation, scoring the first touchdown, you have to credit Mark Stoops and that defensive staff. There's 2 defensive tackles for Kentucky are going to be playing on Sunday. Now the people watching and then listening on our podcast are probably saying, well, what happened whenever South Carolina and Kentucky played and Kentucky won 31-9? Well, that's yet another way how South Carolina just completely out-game planned Kentucky and won that game. Mark Stoops and Kentucky, Frank, came into the game with their backs against the wall. And Ole Miss, quite frankly, wasn't ready. And so many things happened, most importantly for Ole Miss, 1 of 10 on third down. Jaxson Dart simply just did not play a game in which I think Jaxson Dart needs to play. And he had wide-open receivers all day, zeroing in on Trey Harris, who possibly could be the best wide receiver in the country. But when you've got Jordan Watkins, Caden Prieskorn, Caden Lee, all these receivers, Juice Wells running free, Kentucky was fine blitzing 5, 6, and leaving all of their corners and their free safety on an island because Dart wasn't going to them. And Ole Miss could not get the running game going for a lot of reasons, one of which the offensive line, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. They've got a ton of injuries. There's a lot going on with that offensive front. They do not have the cohesiveness they need to have this late into the season. It's a lot of transfers. It just, frankly, didn't go right for Ole Miss, and everything went perfect for Kentucky.
And you mentioned a lot of things there, but I want to be on the inside. You get to talk to the players. You get to talk to the coaches. Jaxson Dart talked about the lack of adjustments at halftime, did he not?
He did. I think that's frustration. We saw, and everyone that watched the game, either personally or on television, saw that it wasn't the same Jaxson Dart. And I don't know if it's because, remember, he's still playing without his starting center. Reese McIntyre is doing the best he can, but Caleb Warren's the best center on the team. We talked with Lane Kiffin. We talked with everyone. Caleb Warren dressed out, looked like he was ready to go, Frank. And then I was on the field, and Warren was snapping to Dart. And I actually texted someone and said, hey, I think Caleb Warren's going to start, regardless of what the depth chart says. He was probable on the injury report, the first one we've seen this year for the Southeastern Conference. It was about 20 players deep.
I saw it.
Now, a lot of that is conjecture. A lot of that's trolling by Lane Kiffin, but a lot of it is truth. There's a lot of beat-up Ole Miss players. The good news is they're getting most of them back for this game on Saturday. But not having Caleb Warren, not having Gerquan Scott, 2 centers, And then also not having Jeremy James with a broken right hand. And now we've learned Jalen Williams, who has graded as one of the best offensive linemen returning, has a lower leg injury, is going to require surgery. So he's out at least 2 or 3 weeks and maybe more. I think that played into a factor. The second thing, and Ole Miss fans are not going to like me saying this, but they miss Quinshon Judkins. They miss a dominant running back even if he were to come in behind Henry Parrish Jr. Right now, we've not seen Ulysses Bentley. Matt Jones, who was on the service team last year, has not gotten significant carries. And so it's basically who Henry Parrish is a really good running back, one of the best in the conference, Frank. But when you don't have a second and third team running back for when he had a hamstring issue at some point during the third quarter, I thought, okay, here's Rashad Amos time. Here's Ulysses Bentley time. But no, we saw Matt Jones, 3rd and 3, stopped in the middle, and then Ole Miss punts. 1 and 10 on third down. You cannot win in the Southeastern Conference going 1 and 10 on third down.
No doubt about it. And that's as people come by the tailgate and as I talk to a lot of Rebel fans at church on Sunday and through the course of the week, those are the questions about what went wrong. Where's Priestcorn?
Yeah.
Where's Bentley? Was that to you a vanilla game plan?
Very much so. And I don't mind people saying that I'm taking any particular road when I say what I'm about to say, but it felt like Ole Miss sleptwalked against Georgia Southern, and they won 52-12, or I don't remember the score. It doesn't matter. I felt like they sleptwalked against Kentucky. I felt like they could roll the ball. They felt like they could roll the ball out and beat Kentucky. 16-point spread. 31-9 loss to South Carolina. Played better against Georgia. Really a turnover, not a turnover, but an official review away from having a chance to win that game. End of the day, you lose. They're 0-2 in the conference, 2-2 overall. It's Kentucky. We're getting ready. We'll go play South Carolina. We'll beat them. Then the big game is LSU.
Which is what we've said all year long.
Which is what we've said, and it feels like what the coaches and the players felt. And they lost. So that's what I think. And I think now the good news and then we can switch over a little bit. What went right?
Yeah, what did they do good? I mean, you mentioned one of them. Parrish is still one of the leading rushers.
Yes, and I love the defensive line play. I thought the defense, and you made a great point earlier, I thought the defense played really well. Now, they've got issues at left cornerback with Isaiah Hamilton and also with, I'll say this, Trey Amos on the right side has been locked down. TJ Dottery's been playing well at linebacker. Coleman, Perkins, I love the linebacker play. Free safety John Saunders Jr., he's been doing fine. But Isaiah Hamilton, it's been an issue over there, along with Brandon Turney. It's a transfer out of Tennessee. I think they're good players, but the problem is they're using their hands too much, Frank, and they're getting called for it. They're picking and they're prodding and they're getting called for fouls, and I think that's messing up their mind a little bit, and therefore the receivers are getting a little bit of separation. And look, officiating did not cause Kentucky to win this game, but there was a major push-off on the 4th and 7 on Barry and Brown down the left side. Now, they didn't call it, and I thought at the time when I was on the field watching, and I thought he maybe extended the arm. The rules official Matt Austin had said ad nauseum of the SEC network, if you use your left hand or right hand to create any type of separation and the body moves of the defender, it's a foul. And it was obvious that Isaiah Hamilton's body was turned away from the ball, which calls for offensive pass interference. Once again, officiating didn't cause Kentucky to win the game, but that was a huge non-call for Ole Miss. The point I'm trying to make is the secondary is using their hands a lot, and I think that's part of that Pete Golding defense. You remember Pete Golding coming out of the tree of Nick Saban. It's always about hold every play. They can't call holding every play, so I want you to hold, bite, claw. They're really targeting Ole Miss, right or wrong. And also, I think it depends on what officiating crew you get. But that crew the other night was calling a lot of holding fouls and a lot of pass interference fouls. And so that's been a little bit that's played in the mantra of the defenders. They've got to shore that up. But what went right, I love the defensive line for Ole Miss. Jared Ivey has really been anchoring along with J.J. Pegues, and they created havoc all day. You have to at some point credit not Will Levis, but Brock Vandegrift for playing a really good game for Kentucky.
And you mentioned it. I thought the defense played well.
I did
overall,
too.
Other than the 4th and 7 conversion, which you say may have been a push-off.
Yeah.
The defense only gave up 20 points. How many times has Ole Miss won? How many times will Ole Miss win without scoring more than 20?
I don't know that they will. I mean, maybe a rare occasion to where you win 24-20, which, how many people, Frank, you were there. I mean, how many people in the stands thought when Ole Miss got the ball back with 2 minutes to go, that bevy of offense, and you're down 20-17, everybody thought, you know what? Ole Miss has played terrible today. Win 24-17, go back to 24-20, go back and get ready for South Carolina, because how many times has Ole Miss come back and scored? Texas A&M, Kentucky, LSU, Auburn. I could go on and on about the last second or the last fourth quarter. Yeah. Ole Miss always has done well down the stretch, and they didn't. And I really think it just goes back to a couple of things on offense. You do not have a consistent offensive line that's banged up, and you don't have that second-team running back that can come in and help Henry Parrish Jr. I think those are two huge components in this offense right now.
Yes, we've always talked about the Lane Kiffin offense as it needed that tight end.
Yes.
And it needed that running back. And we've gotten away from that this year. Or at least in that game.
It feels like Jaxson Dart is leaning maybe a little too heavy on Trey Harris. And
that's the complaint.
A lot of those, Franks, as you remember, when he would step up, turn, and then throw to Harris out in the flat and let him make his move, because Harris is probably the best receiver in the country with yards after contact. So if you get it out in the flat and you get it out to Harris, then he makes his move. But when there's 3 defenders on him already, once again, Frank, I didn't notice this during the game, but I always go back on Sunday and review the film and find out what I missed and maybe some calls here, what was the defenses doing. But most importantly, I wanted to go back and see what the other receivers are doing. And many times, either they're uncovered or they're on an island with the Kentucky defenders. And, many times I saw Jordan Watkins, Caden Priestcorn, Daquan Wright, the tight end out of Virginia Tech that transferred in, Caden Lee. They're just waving their hands. Mm-hmm. And Ole Miss has to get better at distributing the football.
And some of that may be game planning. Some of that may be –
some of it could be in play. Many times I was told that Jaxson Dart checked at the line of scrimmage when it was a running play, checked out of it to go to Harris or to get the ball downfield. We'll see.
And I'm going to say this. You mentioned it earlier. I'm going to say this. It is an adage, well-worn, that you really can only – these are kids. And it's hard to get them up for more than 3 or 4 games a year. So did you overlook Kentucky? And did they overlook Kentucky? Did they come in flat? Try not to expend that extra energy to get them up.
I mean, you're just asking Brad Logan's opinion.
Yes.
Nobody from the university.
No.
I will say this real quick. The Manning Center is locked down this week. No information is coming out. That tells me that they're really honed in on South Carolina. I expect Ole Miss to play lights out on Saturday. To answer your question, yes, I think they did. I think they did from top down. I think they overlooked Kentucky from Lane Kiffin down to the equipment manager.
And I'm not actually saying that's a horrible thing to do, to try to control that energy and not expend it and saving it for going on the road. I mean, that's actually understandable to me.
Yeah. And, I made mention of this a moment ago. If you're going to lose, sure, it's not ideal to lose to Kentucky. I mean, they're a team that's probably going to end up in the Liberty Bowl. It's a 6-6. I do think Mark Stoops salvaged a winnable season by beating Ole Miss. I don't think they're going to play a contributing.
At Tennessee, at Texas.
No, I mean, they're going to struggle at both those places. But then again, who knows? I mean, college football is showing us, if anything, they don't play it on paper. That's why you put the ball down and go. And if they played it on paper, we had Ole Miss at 10-2, losing to Georgia and maybe LSU. But if Ole Miss can win Saturday against South Carolina, then win at LSU, then we're right back where we started. They've lost one game, one conference game. Sure, it's Kentucky, but you're trading Kentucky for LSU. Then you're asking for chaos at the end of the year.
I like it. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with our final 15 minutes. Just like that. That was a quick 15 minutes. Went too fast. We'll be right back on Magnolia Fields, episode 19.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, you know who to call. Call me. Remember, one call, that's all.
Welcome to the Richard Schwartz and Associates Magnolia Field Studios. One call, that's all.
Once again, welcome back into the Richard Schwartz and Associates Studios, Magnolia Fields, episode 19, the Hottie Toddy edition. He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. So we've talked about what went wrong. We talked about what went right.
Right.
Now let's turn the page. What's next? You mentioned it. You teased it before we went to the break. What's next? And obviously, that's at South Carolina and then at LSU before you and I are back in the studios again.
Two opportunities, and the season is on the brink if you're an Ole Miss fan and it's college football playoff or bust. So this is where the college football playoff begins for Ole Miss. You look at a program like South Carolina that put LSU, we went up 17-0, I think, and had an opportunity to put that game away. They didn't. LSU came back and wins it. Of course, the previous week or two they beat Kentucky. So it's a team in which they're licking their chops. They saw this Kentucky game. We heard from Shane Beamer a couple of times, and he understands how good this Ole Miss defense is. But make no mistake, they think they've got Ole Miss's number. Now, Vegas came out and it automatically opened up at 10. I thought, wow, that's high. And all of a sudden, we saw it going down. It got down to 8, got down to 7.5. And now over the last couple of days, we've come back up to around 9.5. So a lot of money is coming on Ole Miss. So what does the betting people know? Apparently, they know a lot of what we know in that Ole Miss simply didn't play well against Kentucky. And I don't know that Carolina is that much better than the Kentucky Ole Miss played this past Saturday. Word leaked that Lenora Sellers, the quarterback for South Carolina, dealing with an ankle injury, didn't play against Akron. He'll play against Ole Miss, according to Pete Thamel of ESPN. Rocket Sanders is someone Ole Miss knows very well. He played at Arkansas, had 250-plus yards against the Rebels 2 years ago. I don't know that he's the running back he was 2 years ago in Fayetteville, but he's got roughly 285 yards in the year, averaging 5 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns. But defensively for Carolina, it's been Nick Amanawari and Debo Williams. Those are two really good players for South Carolina. That defense is very opportunistic. Amanawari's already got 2 interceptions. Williams has already got a fumble recovery. They live and die off that defense, creating turnovers. That's what they did so well against LSU and against Akron last week or the week before. And this is a situation where it's a must-win for Ole Miss. There are no in-betweens. You have to win this game on Saturday.
But the injury reports, you say Sellers can come back. He's going to still be on the injury report. He may try to go, but he may still have trouble with that ankle. You really can't.
Right. You don't know. It could be a lot of games
They're missing a linebacker, missing wide receiver.
Right.
They're going to be a little bit banged up, but that's a tough place to play.
Well, the university announced earlier game week that the game is a sellout, and we knew that it was going to be a buzzsaw. We knew that it was going to be a difficult place to play. You know, you and I talked about this year in the preseason, how that is Williams-Brice Stadium. Even when they were 1-10, Frank, under Lou Holtz, they were selling it out. I mean, it's a very, very proud fan base.
I'm surprised they had to announce that it was a sellout.
Very, very loud. And I don't know if it's a good news or not, but it's not a night game. I don't know if that matters.
I agree with you.
But being 2:30, maybe that favors Ole Miss. One thing I need to bring up, Frank, and I think this is really interesting. This year is the first year of the advent of in-helmet communication. Ole Miss has not faced a team on the road since the advent of the communication via helmet. So if it is really, really loud, the home team and the defensive team, they have a person on the field. Ole Miss is TJ Daughtery. Their offensive player is Jaxson Dart. They have in-helmet communication until 15 seconds to go on the play clock. So if you're Jaxson Dart, you're covering the helmet, you're getting the play crystal clear. There is no all this stuff on the sideline, and there is no verbal. So now you're practicing all week in the Manning Center with the decibels up to airplane level, and you're working on in-helmet communication, and your Jaxson Dart, you've got signs that you can give your offensive lineman if you need to check and change the play. I do think the game will be interesting the first couple of quarters because the noise level would be loud. If Ole Miss can do it, I think they can do, and separate themselves, that should alleviate a lot of crowd noise. But there's no doubt with the return of Juice Wells, that has been amplified times 100. There'll be a lot of very excited South Carolina fans to get on the player of Juice Wells, a wide receiver for Ole Miss. So I do think that will play a factor early, but if Ole Miss does what I think they're going to do, the second half, they should stretch the lead.
Well, and the return of maybe some offensive linemen.
Yes.
You talked about in the last segment.
Right.
Also, you mentioned two big tackles for Kentucky. South Carolina doesn't have quite that size. They're more speed guys.
They're not as good on defense as Kentucky. They're going to be, and they're what people, and I said this a moment ago, they're what people would call an opportunistic defense. And they're ones that create turnovers, but they've given up a lot of yards. And they're not one of the better defenses in the SEC. I think that's a reason where if Ole Miss gets things back right, if you will, on offense, they should be able to feast on that South Carolina secondary. If Jaxson Dart will play like the Jaxson Dart we know, I think so many people, me included, and I think I may speak for a lot of you out there, you get so caught up on one game, you forget about everything that happened last year, and this is the same team that returned. You forget about the first 4 games. I really think, Frank, and this is no indictment on the administration at Ole Miss or the people that are in charge of scheduling, but playing those 4 just hapless opponents has not helped.
You scheduled them years out.
You did, and you didn't expect Wake Forest to be this poor.
You didn't know Wake Forest was going to be a hapless opponent.
Yeah.
I agree. It hurt them.
But there's nothing you could do about it. You play the games that are in front of you. Right.
That's right. That's right. Talk a little bit because we will not be back in the Richard Schwartz and Associates studio for 2 weeks. So we've got to cover the at-LSU game.
Right.
Let's just hypothetical.
Yeah.
Ole Miss takes care of business at South Carolina. Talk a little bit about at LSU at night.
Okay. As we sit here tonight, and this is going to floor probably you, Parker, and anybody else behind the scenes and everybody watching and listening. I think with the loss to Kentucky, if Ole Miss does what I think they're going to do at South Carolina, they're in a better position to win at LSU than had they just
more desperation.
Yes. And I think you can play off of that. And I think Lane Kiffin's really good motivational-wise to play off the fact of we can't lose again. So you better get out there and give all you've got for the next foreseeable future. We saw Georgia, Alabama, and Georgia's just that's going to be a very difficult game for Ole Miss. But we've seen everybody else on the schedule, Frank, and as poorly as Ole Miss played, nobody jumps off the page at you that Ole Miss has remaining.
There's a little bit more parity in the SEC than I thought there was.
And there's a lot of water to pass under the bridge. What about Mississippi State? My goodness, they played so well against Texas. Now, they were without Ewers, their quarterback, but I thought they played well. And that's just one example.
But you can look at that as an example. Maybe Texas didn't expend a lot of energy. Right. Maybe they were fairly vanilla. They got away from their run game, which I think Mississippi State's susceptible to a good running game. The
only thing, I was not surprised that Ole Miss was flat against Kentucky. Here's what I was surprised about, Frank. It's when they connected on 4th and 11 to Caden Prescorn with about a minute to go. Everybody in that stadium knew they were going to win that game.
Yeah.
And they didn't. That surprised me more than anything because Lane always out schemes the other coach late in the game. He didn't out scheme Mark Scoops against Kentucky, and that's what surprised everybody. So to answer your question, I really like Ole Miss's position if they win at Carolina to win at LSU. Now, obviously, if they lose at Carolina, I think you throw the baby out with the bathwater at that point. I think the season's a wash. You're doing your best to keep your team together. That's why I think this game against Carolina is make or break. And I think by the time you and I get together again, if they beat Carolina, I stand by the fact they're going to beat LSU on the road.
Bold statement there. He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. We're going to take one more break. We'll be back to wrap up this episode of Magnolia Fields from the Mac South Sports Network and the Richard Schwartz Associates studio.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, you know who to call. Call me. Remember, one call, that's all.
Welcome back to the Magnolia Field Studios, brought to you by Richard Schwartz and Associates. One call, that's all.
Once again, welcome back in Richard Schwartz and Associates studio, Hotty Toddy edition. This is episode 19 of Magnolia Fields. And so we've talked about what went wrong in the Rebels' loss. We talked about what went right, the bright spots, what is next, South Carolina and add to LSU. But there are other things we need to watch, what to watch, because you've mentioned it twice in the first 25 minutes. Everybody kind of thought Ole Miss would pull that game out. Mm-hmm. I think there are games, teams that we've already seen this year. Missouri, Vanderbilt. Missouri almost lost that one. Should have lost that one. Probably now everybody's kind of thinking, how good is Missouri? Are they really that elite? But they pulled it out. There's one of those games you want to watch this weekend. Mm-hmm. Missouri at Texas A&M.
That's what I'm interested in. How good is Missouri?
Ole Miss won't play A&M.
No, but they'll factor into the
they'll
SEC as a
factor
whole.
into this to the CFP, to the college football playoff. So that's a game you have to watch.
Yeah.
If Ole Miss wins, does Missouri pull it out at a tough place to play at A&M?
I think A&M's a 2-point favorite right now.
They are. College Station. But some of that, don't you think some of that's because they struggled against Vanderbilt?
Probably a little, but I think it's such a big deal to play at home. And that's what's so perplexing about Ole Miss and Kentucky is Ole Miss does so well at home. I think they had won 24 out of the last 26 at home. Just mind-boggling numbers. And so that's just why everybody's kind of scratching their head this week. But looking at Missouri, looking at Texas A&M, this feels like a Mike Elko team that's going to slip up and beat somebody.
That's getting better.
Yeah.
And we picked these games before the season. Then we called these Franco's Fabulous 15. So we weren't wrong that this was going to be a big game all along, particularly because of the college football playoffs.
Right.
And other than the Ole Miss at LSU game next week, which is the game, perhaps, if Ole Miss holds serve and defeats South Carolina at Williams-Brice, we've got the Red River rivalry in the SEC now, Texas and Oklahoma.
And that feels like just a get-right game for Texas at this point. But, you know, Frank, we've seen some crazy things happen in that game. I do expect Texas to do well and to win that game going away, but never count out Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry.
Never. It's a neutral field.
Right.
It's an intense atmosphere.
And we saw how well Mississippi State played last week against Texas. Who knows?
They're not the same team with Arch Manning.
Right. They're not.
Quinn Ewers is being missed, I think, is what we learned last weekend. But the I have to brag once. We've got a Navy helmet here for my alma mater in case anybody's asking.
It's like the first time. I don't know how many years.
To say, right before the season, Franco's Fab 15 actually has 17 games on it. Full disclosure. And one of the last game is the Army-Navy game. Both of them are undefeated right now.
I think someone posted that's like the first time that's happened in I don't know how many years.
Forever.
Yeah.
So, but we've got a lot of football left, and we believe that Ole Miss will take care of business at South Carolina.
I really do.
That will build the rest of the season. And then if they can take care of LSU, then they get a bye. The latest bye in the whole SEC.
Nobody else has a bye any later than that. I also posted this earlier, too. Ole Miss has 2 upcoming games. We just talked about them. At South Carolina, at LSU. Guess what? Both those teams are coming off a bye. So
exactly.
they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Ole Miss. But
and the
wrinkles,
wrinkles worry me.
Yeah, but I can assure you this, is someone that has spoken to me 15 minutes before I walked in the door to record. The type of preparation, and not to say that they don't prepare intensely for every single game, but the preparation going into the game against South Carolina is like none they've seen before. I think it rocked their world. Walter Nolan, the transfer defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, made the comment, this loss shook us, but we got shook right, so to speak. And, here's one thing, too, Frank, and I don't know if I've said this or not, but Jaxson Dart, the quarterback, called an offensive meeting with the team Sunday morning following the game, and it was a very spirited meeting according to wide receiver Caden Lee. So it's obvious that inside that offensive room, that defensive room, and that special teams room, that they're understanding how significant this game is. You and I talk about make or break. I know for a fact that inside the Manning Center, they know they have to have this game on Saturday. That's why I think the line hasn't moved a lot. And that's why people understand we're going to see the Ole Miss that we thought we should have seen against Kentucky and that we've seen maybe even dating back to last year click on all cylinders. They'll figure it out.
He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. We appreciate the men and women behind the scenes getting us on and off the air, preparing the graphics, and Richard Schwartz and Associates for sponsoring our studio. Once again, this has been episode 19 of Magnolia Fields, the Hotty Toddy edition. Until next time on the Max South Sports Network.